right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we're doing something we don't do very often. We're covering a Netflix original movie. We are, of course, talking about Dolemite Is My Name, starring Eddie Murphy, about Dolemite. Rudy Ray Moore, of course, and the classic blaxploitation movies. And it is a fun one, let me tell you that. I had such a great time with this movie. I know I complain about Netflix originals all the time on social media in our popcorn and puzzle pieces group, but credit where credit is due. I really enjoyed this one, and luckily got to see it in the theater thanks to our buddy Josh Bell, who also co-hosts the episode with me today. So that was great that I got a chance to see it in the theater. Funny enough, it's probably not one that needs to be seen in the theater since it's just a sweet little comedy, but it was still great to see it. So before we jump into it, I want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on social media at PiecingPod. Join the aforementioned Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces group where we continue the conversation about all these movies that we talk about on the show. And, just generally say hi and get in touch with us. Let us know what you think about the show because we always love hearing from you guys. So, without any further ado, I'd say let's just jump into this one today. Let's talk about Dolemite Is My Name. All right, so today on the show, we are talking about Dolemite Is My Name, and with me is Josh Bell. How's it going, Josh?
It's going well. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm just enjoying this awesome movie year.
What?
Yeah, we were just recording awesome movie year, so I figured I'd give you guys a little plug there.
Oh, that's so nice of you. Hey, this has been a good movie year.
It has been.
And there's been some awesome movies.
It most certainly has been, yeah. And, I guess we'll, as we get into our wrap-ups and stuff, which will be coming in just like a couple months here, there will be a few Netflix movies in the conversation, even though I rally so hard against Netflix all the time.
I know you do.
I know, but this is one that I actually really enjoyed, so I'm
we got
happy
to see
say
it in the
that.
theater.
We
so.
did. I thank you for that because I wonder if I'd have enjoyed it as much or if I'd have been, playing on Twitter the whole time or something because my damn attention span. But
yeah, that is problematic. I actually can't. I like this movie, but I came out of it thinking like, it's nice that I saw it in the theater, but it's the kind of movie that I could have been perfectly satisfied to watch at home.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like a lot of times when these movies come out, and you get the tweet, the takes immediately, and it's like, see it in the biggest screen possible. I think you're right. It's not necessary, but for me and my attention span, it's always good to see movies in the theater whenever possible.
Glad we got to do that.
Yes, absolutely. So Dolemite Is My Name. Aside from just being, Dolemite, we talked about this at the screening about how the Dolemite movies aren't necessarily the greatest movies in the world. They're just these like silly, fun things from back in the day. And, aside from this guy, Rudy Ray Moore, and his story, his life story, the movie story, the other big story of the movie is Eddie Murphy.
Yeah. I think people have been saying that this is sort of a movie about Eddie Murphy's career in a way as well. Even though I think Rudy Ray Moore had a very different career, Eddie Murphy has enjoyed much greater success and much higher acclaim for a much longer period of time.
And for good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is a bit of a comeback for him in that he hasn't been particularly prolific in the last several years, and the movies that he has made have been very poorly received.
Absolutely, yeah. And I feel like in this time that he hasn't done that much, everything he's done has been almost like oh look, he's back and he's great, I remember
really?
remember like he got so much praise when what was it, Dreamgirls came out, and then there was another one around that time too, but
Norbit?
No, it was not.
That was around the same time. That was why he lost the Oscar, allegedly.
Yeah. But I feel like there were other things around that time that he was getting praise for. But yeah, I guess Norbit kind of wipes the slate clean.
Yeah, well, and also you're saying recent Dreamgirls came out 13 years ago.
I know.
And I think really since then is the time that I'm thinking of where he's done comedies kind of like Norbit, and at least Norbit was like a box office success. But then there's these other dreadful high concept comedies like Meet Dave that are terrible but also not successful.
Yeah.
And then a handful of, he had a movie like, I think maybe even his most recent movie called Mr. Church, which was a kind of serious true life drama that I never saw, but again was just like horribly reviewed.
Yeah.
And barely got a release.
That's right. That did not do very well.
Yeah. So I think it's weird because Dreamgirls was sort of like a new height for him, and he got nominated for an Oscar, and it was so popular and so successful. And then he followed it up by doing nothing good for like 13 years.
Yeah, he almost has like an Adam Sandler kind of thing going on, but now he's got a big, huge role that he's getting a lot of acclaim for.
And he deserves it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Dolemite Is My Name. Why don't we get into some puzzle pieces? What do you got for your first one?
Well, my first one is one that I'll cheat a little because we talked about it, and I think it's probably on your list, so I'll steal your thunder and mention The Disaster Artist.
Yes.
The biopic about Tommy Wiseau / the making of The Room. And like you said, the Dolemite movies, and I've only seen the original Dolemite, which is what's focused on in this movie. And there were some, I think maybe 1 or 2 sequels, and also Rudy Ray Moore made a bunch of other similar movies that weren't specifically about Dolemite, but had a lot of the same sensibility to them. And I've only seen that original, but it is, I would say, like The Room of blaxploitation movies.
Right.
It's very bad. And it's very bad in a way that is so unique to Rudy Ray Moore. And you watch this movie and you think there's the only way that this could possibly have been made is as the weird vision of this one guy who is the main creative force. He didn't direct it, but he's the co-writer. He created the character of Dolemite. He's the star of it. And the movie is designed to showcase him sometimes to his detriment. And I think that was exactly what happened with Tommy Wiseau in The Room. And that's a movie that went on to have a big cult following, as Dolemite did, and where people look back on it now and they have a lot of affection for Tommy Wiseau, as I think happened to Rudy Ray Moore in his later years. And it's so both The Disaster Artist and Dolemite Is My Name look at the making of these bad movies and everything that kind of haphazardly happened with a sense of affection.
Sure.
Like giving credit to these people, like, hey, maybe these movies were bad, but these were people who didn't have a lot going for them. They didn't have a lot of resources. They didn't have a lot of support, but they had passion and they put these movies together no matter what. And I think they're similarly constructed.
Yeah, I think another parallel to The Disaster Artist is just the way that, as you're watching, you're kind of, you almost are wondering like why didn't people just give up on him? But he just seems to suck people in, and that was exactly what was happening with Tommy Wiseau. I mean, people just, it was almost like they couldn't leave. They just had to see it through, no matter what was going to happen and no matter how just crazy and ridiculous it got during the making of these things.
Right. And I think another thing in The Disaster Artist, you see these like loving recreations of the most ridiculous moments in The Room. And you have that here too, as they recreate these bits from the original Dolemite. And perhaps the only disappointing difference is that Rudy Ray Moore is not around to see the appreciation the way that Tommy Wiseau is.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think he felt some love, especially from like the hip hop community and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, well, all right. I'm going to go with my first puzzle piece. I'm going to kind of jump around here. I wasn't going to start with this, but just because we were talking about that appreciation in the hip hop community. And also we're talking about those recreations of scenes. So this is one of those weird ones where it's like, where a movie that's like either a long-time sequel or based on a true story or whatever. It's one of those ones that the thing I'm going to bring up was inspired by the original. So it was inspired by Dolemite, which I think in turn kind of inspired this a little bit.
Sure.
That is Pootie Tang.
All right.
Which as I was watching Dolemite Is My Name, and I've seen, I don't know how many Dolemite movies I've seen, certainly none of them since high school, and I don't know how many Rudy Ray Moore records I've listened to. Again, certainly not since many, many years ago. But regardless, there were bits of the recreations that I was like, oh, I saw this scene in Pootie Tang. Like they were clearly so super inspired by everything about Rudy Ray Moore and the Dolemite movies. And so I think it's almost like a bridge between the original and then the making of, kind of.
Yeah. And I think the fact that so many movies like Pootie Tang were and hip hop artists like Snoop Dogg, who of course appears in this movie.
Uh-huh.
The fact that they were influenced by Dolemite had an influence on the sort of inspiration to make this movie.
Yeah.
That the lasting impact of Dolemite is what led them to want to make a movie about Rudy Ray Moore.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think I really realized it going into this movie. It's one of the things I liked the most about the movie, is I feel like a lot of the silliness of hip hop kind of comes from that influence, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously I've done my comedy rap in the past and stuff. I very much appreciate the silliness of, like, you know, Snoop Dogg and Wu-Tang when they get very out there and ridiculous. And I love that stuff. And I think a lot of that influence comes from this.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not really like a hip hop expert in any way, but I can absolutely see how that is the case.
For sure. Well, what do you got for your next one?
Well, I'll kind of circle back a little to The Disaster Artist, and in a very similar vein, my next pick is Tim Burton's Ed Wood, which I believe actually has the same writers, Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who are kind of biopic experts.
Interesting.
As they wrote this film, I believe I should have looked it up to verify, but I'm pretty sure they wrote Ed Wood. They also wrote The People versus Larry Flint. They wrote Man on the Moon, the Andy Kaufman biopic starring Jim Carrey, and they wrote the bulk of the American Crime Story season about the O.J. Simpson trial. So they're very well versed in this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But them aside, I mean, Ed Wood, like The Disaster Artist, is this very loving tribute to somebody who was kind of a larger than life character and made these really, really bad movies and drew people in, like you were saying about Tommy Wiseau, that he didn't know what he was doing, and the people who worked with him kind of knew that he didn't know what he was doing, and yet he had this charisma and this passion that was undeniable. And I think Burton, you know, captures that really well in that film. And another thing I think that Ed Wood does is that, you know, it's shot in black and white in part to reflect the style of Ed Wood movies. And there are definitely aspects of Dolemite Is My Name that are meant to visually reflect blaxploitation and Rudy Ray Moore films. And another thing is the kind of incorporation of the semi-famous name that they recruit. Of course, it's Bela Lugosi, played by Martin Landau in Ed Wood. And here we have D'Urville Martin, the supporting actor from many blaxploitation films, who takes himself very, very seriously, played by Wesley Snipes. And he's the only professional person in this entire production who they recruit to direct and to play a supporting role. And very, very entertaining performance by Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, I know we're not here to just straight up review a movie, but wow, what one of the more fun performances this year, I think.
Yes.
And I would just say, you know, I don't know about you, but any movie that you could say, you know, Ed Wood as an inspiration for the movie, that's probably a movie I want to see.
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely, like, I do have a fondness, maybe not to the degree that you have a fondness for The Room, but I do have a fondness for these kind of weird figures who make movies out of their own strange imaginations, regardless of their talent. You know, someday we'll probably have a Neil Breen biopic. And I will watch that.
I look forward to that. So I'm just gonna say right up front that if not all, most of the rest of my puzzle pieces are going to be about, like, the kind of do-it-yourself aesthetic of this movie, and so I just starting right at the front. I'm gonna go with a movie that normally I try not to look at the same director, but I'm going to look at Hustle and Flow.
I had that on my list too. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, once these characters start, I guess in a way it's like once you get the bug, you know, and you just get into the act of creating, and it just gets to be fun. And I know that very well from my own personal, you know, everything that I've worked on in my career. But once you get into it, you really get into it, and you just have fun with it. And it doesn't matter that maybe the resources aren't there, maybe the talent's not even really there, but you know, there's just so much fun to that, and it's just so infectious to watch them, like, just coming together and just figuring this stuff out as they go.
Yeah, I agree. And I did have that on my list. And I think that was a movie that really captured that very well. I mean, I remember at the time that came out, it was a big debut for Craig Brewer, and he's had kind of a rocky career since then. I think this is his first feature film in quite some time.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see him back doing that. But yeah, Hustle and Flow just had that kind of energy to it. And not only, I mean, it was his first film, but it was also a big breakout for Terrence Howard.
Sure.
And for the song that ended up winning an Oscar. And like I said, I'm not a hip hop fan really at all, but that was a movie that could draw me in as someone who doesn't listen to this music and convey the like infectious enthusiasm.
It's hard out here for a pimp as your ringtone, isn't that right?
That's so true. But I remember liking that, even though, I mean, I think to me, a lot of times the way I feel about songs and music in movies is that I can come out of a movie and say like, wow, that had really great music.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that I would ever actually listen to the music like on its own.
Yeah.
But in the context of the movie, I was really into it. And I definitely felt that way about the music in Hustle and Flow, and also the music in Dolemite, in the original Dolemite. I feel like the one technical aspect that the original Dolemite does really well is the music.
Yeah, those are some serious session players, like just making that just straight up funk music. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yes, it is.
Well, what do you got next?
Well, the next thing I have kind of goes back to your Pootie Tang pick, which is a movie that was clearly influenced by Dolemite and thus now has influenced this new film, and that is Black Dynamite, which I think we talked about on a previous episode when we were talking about The Velocipaster.
Sure.
The best film of 2019.
You heard it here, folks.
Yes. But I think, like you were saying with Pootie Tang, when I saw Black Dynamite when it first came out in, I think it's 2009, maybe. I saw it at, I think it was actually at the Cine Vegas Film Festival here. And at the time that I saw it, I had never seen a blaxploitation movie. I think the only reference point I had for Black Dynamite is actually another movie that I just hadn't thought of, but would be another good puzzle piece here, which is I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, the Keenan Ivory Wayans film. So I thought Black Dynamite was amusing, and I've since then seen more blaxploitation movies, and you can see a bit of it in some of the other, like the big ones like Shaft and Black Caesar. But watching Dolemite, I was like, okay, this is Black Dynamite. Like everything in this movie is what they're doing in Black Dynamite. In terms of the technical limitations, the boom mics in the shot, and the ridiculous way that people talk, and the conspiracies that make no sense. So I think the fact that Black Dynamite created this goodwill for, I mean, maybe not created, but helped create, along with like hip hop artists, like you were saying, helped create that goodwill, leads them to want to make a movie like this. And one fun kind of side note that I noticed when I was just reading something else is that the costume designer for this film, for Dolemite Is My Name, is the same costume designer who worked on Black Dynamite.
Oh, they must have like just a closet that's just out of control.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm gonna Get You Sucker on the list.
Yeah, that's a good. I haven't seen that in a really, really long time, but that is a definitely a good pick there as well.
So good. All right, I'm gonna go with my next one, which again involves, just kind of like a ragtag group of people making movies, and that is Be Kind, Rewind, the Michel Gondry movie, where they decide to recreate movies, they Swede them, and I feel like there's so many aspects of the Dolemite movie that they're kind of taking things that they love and recreating them, and like the Bruce Lee fights and the just all the kinds of like little things from B movies and stuff that they loved before, and just kind of making it their own. And it reminded me of that kind of a spirit.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And there's that great scene where Rudy Ray Moore is talking to this very serious playwright that he's hired to write the movie, played by Keegan-Michael Key. And he's just kind of rattling off the things from movies that he wants. Like, well, we got to have kung fu, and we got to have naked ladies, and we got to have explosions and guns. And I think there's one, I can't remember if it was like vampires or aliens or some other aspect that he goes a little too far with.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that the writer's able to say, like, well, maybe not that.
Yeah.
But we still, we got to have kung fu, we got to have explosions, and we got to have naked ladies. I think that's very much the idea that Rudy Ray Moore and everyone in this movie, they're people who just saw what they liked in other movies and just said, why can't we just put all of that stuff in our movie?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's also, I guess, just in some way it's a matter of representation. Even like it's like, why can't we have that movie?
Right.
You know, why can't we have those kinds of scenes in our movie?
Yeah, exactly. They go see movies starring white people that have all of those aspects, and it's like, why don't we have one of those as well?
Which is great.
Yeah.
What do you got for your next one?
Well, this is my last one because I had Hustle and Flow also. And,
sure.
And this goes to, I think, again, the kind of thing that you were talking about, movies about people with limited resources who just go for it and make their own film. And another Eddie Murphy movie, which is Bowfinger, starring Steve Martin as the huckster B-movie producer who decides that he's going to make his magnum opus Chubby Rain, starring Kit Ramsey, the big movie star played by Eddie Murphy. But they're going to do it without him knowing that he's in the movie, and they film it kind of surreptitiously, and then they end up hiring his twin brother, I think.
Yeah.
Played also by Eddie Murphy. And it's obviously completely ridiculous and far more over the top than this movie, but I think it has that same spirit, like Be Kind, Rewind, of like people who don't know what they're doing necessarily, but just have so much love for movies and so much passion for throwing together whatever weird, dumb stuff that they can come up with.
Yeah.
And somehow it all works out. And that's a funny movie. I think both Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy have had very rocky later careers. And I feel like that's a highlight for them, even though, I mean, it's probably 20 years old or something at this point, but of the last couple decades.
I feel like whatever year that is, that might be my pick when we get to it on Awesome Movie Year.
All right.
Yeah, that's I haven't seen it in a long time, but I just remember loving that so much.
Yeah, I did
so
too.
Much fun.
It's also been a while for me, but I also thought that movie was great.
All right. Well, that means I only have one more because, that was on my list too.
Oh, okay.
So I've got one last one. And like I said, I mean, it's going to continue this theme of people just, trying to make something, and just kind of learning to have fun with it along the way. Brigsby Bear, which was, I thought, a lot of fun. An indie film from, I want to say 2016, just a couple of years ago. But again, it's got that do-it-yourself spirit and that just trying to make something out of nothing and just a love of the movies, and I just think that that's such a fun thing. It's such a fun place to take some characters and just kind of see what they end up doing,
Yeah, I love Brigsby Bear. I think that's a really underrated movie. I wish more people would see it. And it is a fun movie, but I feel like it also is a really good movie about like emotional trauma.
Sure.
And the way that creating films can be a way to deal with that. And there's nothing that heavy at all in Dolemite Is My Name, but especially the beginning, you do get a sense of Rudy Ray Moore as this guy who's had a lot of failure in his life and is kind of beaten down and is sad and is maybe channeling some of that into discovering this overconfident character of the Dolemite pimp, which is not him at all, but it gives him that confidence that he's been lacking in his own actual life.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, this movie does, as silly and fun as it is, I mean, it does have its emotional moments and everything, and everything that happens with Lady Reed and I mean, there's stuff there, but certainly not like Brigsby Bear.
No, definitely not. And it doesn't need to be as heavy. I mean, I think there's aspects of Rudy Ray Moore's personal life, like his sexuality, that they really kind of don't get into in this movie. It could have been a slightly more serious, slightly heavier piece, but I think it's a good balance for what it is. And it's really focused on the idea that we're talking about of the outsiders making a movie more so than it is about Rudy Ray Moore and his own kind of personal emotional journey.
Sure. It's like it's a Dolemite movie.
It's better than, I think, as I said to you at the screening, as much as Dolemite is beloved, like pretty much everyone in this movie is way more charismatic and talented than Rudy Ray Moore ever was. And that's not to diminish his contributions at all, but you watch this movie and you think, this is so entertaining. I bet Dolemite is so much fun to watch. And Dolemite, at least from my perspective, is like, it's a rough go to get through it.
You know what? I'll just say we're pre-recording this. This is going to come out when the movie hits Netflix. I am going to make sure to watch at least one Dolemite movie to see how it really holds up for me. And we'll see, because like I said, it's been forever, but I have a feeling I might still kind of dig those movies. They're just I don't know.
You're not alone. I mean, obviously they have that's why this movie exists, is because they have a big following among a lot of influential people.
Absolutely. Well, let's do the finished puzzle, and then we'll get into any closing thoughts. Finished puzzle for Dolemite Is My Name includes The Disaster Artist, Pootie Tang, Ed Wood, Hustle and Flow, Black Dynamite, I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, Be Kind Rewind, Bowfinger, and Brigsby Bear. I love a movie that deals with making movies. There's, it's such a great tradition of that kind of thing, because it shows such a love for that creativity and everything. And I'm sure, I don't know, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure it doesn't always work out. But these movies on our list right here, I love all of these movies.
Yeah, those are all really good movies, and I do like. I mean, maybe it's a cliche that people who make movies like to make movies about how great it is to make movies, but it is great. And as a person who loves to watch movies, like, I like to be reminded of the power of filmmaking. And yeah, I mean, there's movies like what comes to mind is like Lost in La Mancha, the Terry Gilliam documentary, which is a great movie about making a movie where everything goes wrong and then they literally give up.
Right.
But I mean, and that's not a fiction film, but sure. I'm sure there's other examples that are out there about failure.
Sure.
But even in the failure, I mean, even that movie is about how everyone involved has such dedication that they will endure so much before they finally throw in the towel.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do you think as far as, I mean, I think we've said what we're going to say about Eddie Murphy being great in this, but what do you think about the fact that it seems like now it's just sequel after sequel that he's jumping back into? I mean...
yeah, I mean, it's hard to blame him specifically for that, given that that's like what everyone does now.
Yeah.
And hey, he's got Craig Brewer directing the Coming to America sequel, so they obviously worked well together here.
Yeah.
That's slightly promising. I mean, I'd rather see a Coming to America sequel than an Orbit sequel. I guess that's what I can say about that.
There you go. I think that works quite well. Right on. Well, what is something else you watched recently you want to recommend?
Well, a movie that will be just out on VOD and DVD as this is coming up, and that sadly skipped a theatrical release. I was bummed after having watched it, of course, at home, that no one is going to get to see it in the theater. Is a movie called Sweetheart by J.D. Dillard, who made a movie a couple years ago called Slight that not a lot of people saw. Kind of a weird mix of urban drama and superhero sci-fi stuff that I thought was really good and creative and an interesting mix of genres. And now he's got this film called Sweetheart, which is also a creative mix of genres in a very, very different way. It's basically like Castaway, but with a monster. And Kiersey Clemons is great in a role that, like Tom Hanks in Castaway, she's almost the entire movie, a lot of it without dialogue, as this woman who gets stranded on a desert island where, in fact, there is a monster, a sea monster, and she has to resourcefully survive. And later on, some stuff happens that deals with kind of a similar kind of relationship drama as actually like in Midsummer, where it uses the horror to address the way men treat women and whether they're believed or not. And I just thought it was really rich thematically. It's got a great performance from Kiersey Clemons. It's suspenseful. It's good minimalist use of special effects until, the one moment where they show you too much. But overall, I think it was at Sundance and maybe at South by Southwest, and it got kind of mixed reactions out of festivals, and I just really liked it. So I don't know why I didn't get a theatrical release. It's being put out by Blumhouse. Check it out on VOD right now. It's called Sweetheart.
Yeah, I did hear good things about it. Now that you jogged my memory with that, but yeah, maybe I'll watch it.
I know you hate watching movies at home.
I know,
but that's the only way you're going to see it.
Damn it! All right, we'll see. Well, Josh, where can we find what you're doing?
Well, of course, there's Awesome Movie Year, the podcast that I co-host with Jason Harris, and that is produced by the fabulous David Rosen. We talk about a different year in movies in each season, and we're in the thick of our 2007 movie season. So you can catch that at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and look for Awesome Movie Year wherever you get podcasts. And I am at joshbellhateseverything.com, Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at Signal Bleed on Twitter.
Beautiful. Well, I'm glad we did this one. Like I said, there's so many great movies on this list. I just thought it was a lot of fun getting to talk about some of these.
Yeah, it's a fun movie.
Yeah. People watch it. This episode of Piecing It Together is brought to you by the Truth Be Told Hip Hop Podcast. Although a fairly simple premise, what makes the show compelling is the camaraderie shared among the hosts, Big UU, Rifa, and Black Todd. The casual and unstructured format of the show is akin to an organic conversation, the kind that hip-hop fans usually have with each other, with plenty of strong opinions and off-the-cuff rants and debates. Add it to the different backgrounds of each host, and what you're left with is a good and entertaining mix of personalities and perspectives all in one place. Subscribe now to the Truth Be Told Hip Hop Podcast on your favorite podcast player. You know, I did promise that I was going to watch the original Dolemite. I told Josh I would do it, and guess what? I did it. I know I don't watch movies at home nearly enough, but I did it, and I liked it a lot more than Josh did. Let's put it that way. Watching the old school Dolemite, I thought there were some really funny moments within it, and it is really bad though. But I mean, there's a lot that's just so ridiculous. I love how just truly bad Rudy Ray Moore was as Dolemite, but. You know, it is what it is. It works in that context, and I maybe one of these days I'll watch one of the other movies he went on to make after this. It would be interesting to see if he got any better. My guess is probably not, but I'm sure he still had people laughing all through those years, and you know, it's a great contribution to midnight. So bad it's good cinema. And this was a great movie and a great conversation with Josh Bell. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and you can just, follow us, social media at Piecing Pod. Join the Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. You can support us on Patreon. Most likely you are listening to this on the main Piecing It Together podcast feed, but this was one of 2 episodes this week that went up early on the Patreon. That's not something we're going to do all the time or anything, but it is, I'm starting to record some bonus content that's going to go on the Patreon, and just to kind of flesh it out, if we have an episode done ahead of time, I will squeeze it in on Patreon. That way our Patreon subscribers can check it out, ahead of whether it's the VOD release date, or if we have like a couple episodes in the can that need to go up first, or whatever kind of scheduling. If there's something just waiting to get posted, might as well throw it up on there for anybody that supports us on there. We do appreciate the support. So along with that kind of support, you can also vote for us. Well, actually, it's nominate us, not voting yet. Nominate us for the Discover Podcast Awards, Best TV and Movie Episode. Best TV and Movie Podcast, not episode. Best TV and Movie Podcast. That would be awesome if you did that. We would love to get into the running for the actual award. But, as always, we mainly just want to put on a great show for you guys. But if you'd like to support the show, go ahead and nominate us. That would be awesome. So that does it for today. Let's leave you guys with a piece of music today. And because Dolemite is such a influential figure in the world of hip-hop, I don't do this very often, but I'm going to dig into my comedy rap career for for one of my tracks from that whole period of my life, and go with something a little old school hip hop influenced that I think would maybe fit with a Dolemite type of theme. This is a song called "Don't Eat Fire" from the D-Mize Dee album 6 years later. It's a very silly, ridiculous, hopefully not too offensive comedy rap song that we put out about 2006-ish, I want to say. And we used to do this stuff on a pretty regular basis before my career composing music for film. And then, of course, nowadays, getting into podcasting has taken off. So this music still is all out there, ready to embarrass me at any turn. But, of course, is supposed to do that because it's so freaking ridiculous. But enjoy Don't Eat Fire, and we'll be back with another episode of Piecing It Together next week along with some of my quote-unquote real music.
Come on now. Come on. Now.
Kids, listen up now. We've got a message that we would like to share. It is important, so listen up now. We've got a message that you really should know. Don't eat fire.
1, 2, 3 in the place to be. Jewish DAV to the EMC with a little message for all the kids. Gonna teach you little shorties how you gotta live. I'm not gonna tell you not to do drugs, but wait for college. And I won't tell you not to skip school, but get your knowledge. Jewish Dave grew up right and he built a gangster rap empire, cause he knew all along that he should never eat fire.
Kids, listen up now. We've got a message that we would like to share. It is important, so listen up now. We've got a message that you really should know. Don't eat fire.
Kids, don't eat fire, yo buddy, don't be a dummy. You won't think it's funny when you swallow burn up your tummy. Sitting on your porch with your face all torched up. Your cute little face now looks like a pork chop. If you don't wanna get a job working at a truck stop, for fuck's sake, put out the flame, listen to hip hop.
Kids, listen up now. We've got a message that we would like to share. It is important, so listen up now. We've got a message that you really should know. Don't eat
Yo, little
fire.
seed, it's time to be a man. Look a man in his eyes when you shake a man's hand. Use your left hand when you smack around a bitch. Be polite and treat her nice. Make sure you call her miss. Take her out every night to eat at Ruth's Chris. If you want, you could even offer to pay, but don't open the door for her, cause that shit's gay. Tell her she looks pretty and compliment her mouth. If you don't have a Jimmy, be sure to pull out. If she gets thirsty, share your fat tire. If she gets kinda tired, share your coke to keep her wired. Don't get caught if you're gonna be a liar. Don't date a bitch if she's gonna be a crier. You can't get no pussy, man, your dick should retire. But most of all, boys and girls don't eat fire.
Kids, listen up now. We've got a message that we would like to share. It is important, so listen up now. We've got a message that you really should know. Don't eat fire. Don't eat fire.
And all points west.